Hi, my name is Nathaniel Flamiano, and this is Film Formulas, the art of spaghetti westerns and their action counterparts. There are certain risks directors must take note of in the construction of a shot. Shots take up most of the film's movement from point A to point B, or transitions from scene to scene. Shots help keep a movie going forward to its final shot, the movie's ending. Without the right amount of detail and focus, directors can lose their audience or fail to present a story if their shots are incoherent or incohesive. For action movies, camera shots play an essential role because they must highlight the ideas of how and what with little or no dialogue. Action movies grab specific elements such as editing and camera work, all the while pushing the boundaries of concepts that are already inherently complex. These elements establish story structures such as character development as well. By blending elements to drive the story forward, action movies offer unique and complex compositions of design, movement, editing, and even performance. Every element, frame, camera pan, and cut exist for a reason, and action movies highlight how these parts are combined to create a story within the scene. So, what does this all have to do with spaghetti westerns? Well, let's dive in. The Italian Western subgenre of film is a combination of several global influences that incorporate elements that on paper did not automatically look like clear and concise composition. The Cincinnatus, or Italian Western, branded by the United States as the Spaghetti Western, was a collection of ideas and elements that stemmed back to early cowboy fiction, Japanese samurai films, with a dash of visceral and violent themes, with a mix of neorealism and finally a combination of tropes that defined Hollywood Westerns, such as the cowboy hero fighting for good in the face of evil, or the bandit trying to pull off a grand heist. This amalgamation of ideas boldly pushed for aesthetic innovation, coupled with both expressive cinematography and storytelling that addressed the raw characters that embodied the Western frontier identity in America at the time. And this is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, one of the many films that highlight the art of spaghetti westerns. It is seen as one of the greatest and most influential movies of the Western genre. It highlights how the genre has evolved to more innovative and more evocative storytelling through its cinematic elements. The action sequences are interwoven with the plot, and the violence drives storytelling. Now let's jump to the modern film age, to a film that is critically acclaimed and as some critics have even named the greatest action film ever made, Mad Max: Fury Road. Fury Road shows how the action genre can be pushed to its limits, and explores how narratives can be constructed around the action, pacing, and rhythm. So subsequent editing composes each scene, while the over-the-top excessive violence enthralls the audience. For this video, I'd like to analyze both movies and how they reveal the shifts in filmmaking, how they create a composition and structure formulaically, revealing society's need for both action and violence. Let's get to it. In The Good and the Bad and the Ugly, director Sergio Leone exemplifies formulaic composition through his groundbreaking storytelling and adventurous innovation. The film fully grasps the idea that spaghetti westerns were the catalyst for action-riddled movies, and ultimately sets the foundation for the action genre and its interpretation across all international cinema. The movie is highly regarded for its rhythm and consistency in its editing. Leone introduces its sense of scale while stylizing its details by providing the audience a fluid run through its camera movement from shot to shot. For Mad Max: Fury Road, however, the director George Miller carries the same stylistic elements and places them in a modern dystopia, filled with chaos and violence. Taking the formula that Sergio Leone established in the 1960s and 70s and calling back to why the Western genre was so successful, he highlights momentum. Momentum is critical in action movies. In Fury Road, we see this relentless drive from scene to scene with the overall rhythm and gritty consistency of camera shots. Let's take the most climatic scene from both movies, namely the final action sequences, and see why each idea is essential for detail and focus. First up is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and its final scene. Known as the Mexican standoff or the trio scene, it is regarded as the best example of both editing and camera work, and how both can really tell a story. The scene is gratuitous, about 2.5 minutes long. It is a silent stare down between the characters Blondie, played by Clint Eastwood, Angel Eyes, played by Lee Van Cleef, and Tuco, played by Eli Wallach. It is the epic wrap-up of all the violence and action that the audience follows throughout the film. From start to finish, Leone orchestrates the scene by using elements in editing to keep consistency. He sets up the situation by using an establishing shot of the whole ordeal, and he then uses an establishing profile shot of each individual. The next shots in particular are cuts between each character. What is interesting in the edit is that Leone keeps each shot similar, creating a match between each character's face, their holster where their gun is, and coming closer to each individual's eyes, and following the eyes with camera movement as they stare at each specific person. It is a flurry of shots that lead up to an inevitable moment. who shoots first. Essentially, in this sequence, Leone is portraying this event while there's little to no dialogue. The only real elements progressing the movie forward is the visual storytelling created by the editing and camera movement. There is also a sense of balance. Leone uses same shots of each character and then uses the tension that is building up between the shots and lets them go tighter and shorter. In essence, creating anticipation for the next sequence, and the next sequence, and the next sequence. This editing is methodical and allows for the viewer to register the scene and figure out what is happening and why it's happening, the how and what. It is this blend of cinematic elements along with the progression of shot after shot embedding this idea that the scene is close to the mimicry of reality. In reality, decisions are mostly drastic, and often there is little to no time to plan when the situation is out of control. Leone plays with the energy in the scene, taking something established and pushing its boundaries, making something more grandiose. The effects of the good, the bad, and the ugly success can be felt in action movies filmed today. The editing carries on and is further pushed with more avant-garde filmmaking. Some notable action movies continue to stretch how we perceive action movies. Take the work of John Woo in Hard Boiled, or the Wachowski sisters in The Matrix Reloaded. We see this evolution of cinematography in action movies. Director George Miller presents even more innovations to film in the creation of Mad Max Fury Road. Going back to the idea that we are taking the most climatic scenes or action sequences in these two films, Mad Max Fury Road's final scene, a whole 12-minute action circus extravaganza, is riddled with different camera shots, with different cuts that carry the momentum forward. Just like the good, the bad, and the ugly, each establishing shot in this sequence creates the next phase in movement. What's most important about Fury Road, however, is the characters are moving. The truck is moving, trying to flee from the Legion of War Boys and Immortan Joe. Enemies are climbing aboard the truck, and we can see how the camera pans and moves from the left to the right and either to the front or the back. Max, played by Tom Hardy, and Furiosa, played by Charlize Theron, are met with a dire decision. After we, the audience, have been following their tragic ride in the desert, we see that they must return to where they started. This scene is probably the most complicated regarding setup and technicality from start to finish because it features a host of cuts and camera movement. What is unique about this sequence is that it builds up tension and anticipation following the timing of cuts and changes in camera framing and movement. It looks chaotic, but there is still structure. You see this in the rhythmic pacing of the scenes, almost gluing together the shifts in emotion that are trying to be portrayed. Fear is the driving force moving the group forward, so this pacing builds up with every ounce of fear portrayed. This anticipation is met with small sighs of relief, but then we are quickly reeled back to another obstacle that has to be overcome. Each little event and scene holds the attention of the viewer for a few frames at a time, and while it seems crazy, there's still a sense of rhythm and movement. If the good, the bad, and the ugly holds the same idea of consistency, creating rhythm through movement, then both movies essentially create story structure without the help of dialogue. It is without such characteristics there would be no driving force to carry the movie forward. With the right rhythm in action movies holding the pieces together and shifting the focus from shot to shot, it really holds the audience in place. We register each new shot, and we peer into these film worlds and explore what's around them. What's interesting about the pacing in action movies, however, is how close the action is replicating reality itself. This version of reality, through visual storytelling, replicates how society views violence and action. Because it feels so real, it is reflective of the idea that each world is almost mimicking our world through the art of filmmaking. In conclusion, the cinematic elements in both The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly and Mad Max Fury Road leads to reveal that the same film formula in regards to rhythm through editing and camera work is being replicated from movie to movie. Action movies are the tip of the iceberg for movie genres, but they possess elements that evolved over time and changed to match the evolving storytelling and context provided. The force of innovation led to these ideas of filmmaking, and it's in these moments and sequences in film that influence the creation of more movies, whether they choose to follow the formula or even tweak it. Thanks for watching.